Good evening, everybody. My name is Desiree, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening as your moderator for the second M+ Public Forum. We're just settling down at the moment, so if I can just kindly remind you that we do have simultaneous translation this evening in 3 languages, which is Cantonese, Putonghua, and English. 多謝大家嚟臨呢一個 M+ 嘅公眾研討會。我姓歐，好恭喜可以今晚為你哋做一個主持。咁我哋開始之前呢，我想提一提大家，我哋今晚呢係有所有嘅對話呢係會有一個即時嘅翻譯嘅。咁我哋有中文啦、廣東話啦，同埋英文同埋國語嘅。咁如果你哋未攞你哋嘅耳筒嘅話呢，咁就隨時可以通知我哋嘅工作人員。So, okay, I think the lights have dimmed right now, so I'm going to begin if that's okay with everybody. Once again, I would like to welcome you all to the second M+ Forum, where we are now and where we are going. Tonight we will have a 3-part presentation by the senior executives of M+. We will start with a development update from the executive director, Lars Nittve, followed by a very interesting discussion about the new collection that they've acquired from Mr. Uli Zik, who is one of the most foremost contemporary art collectors of the world today. And that will be presented by P. Lee. And it will be followed by a presentation on museum education, presented by another one of their staff, Stella Fong, I'm sorry. I can't really see with the light kind of shining in my eyes. And for the rest of the public, we do have a public Q&A session that will commence at about 8:15. So we would appreciate very much if you can actually keep your questions until then, and we will have a chance to let everybody speak. Without further delay, I'm going to do this very quickly in Chinese, and I'm very sure you are all anxious to hear about the latest development of M+. 我哋今晚嘅研討會咧係會有分3個階段進行啦。咁樣首先我哋會邀請我哋嘅 Executive Director Lars Nittve 去做一個最新動向嘅匯報啦，咁同埋我哋另外咧就會有另外一個同事叫 P. Lee， 咁佢就會講翻一個好重要嘅acquisition for 呢一個 museum，which is from 一個非常之出名嘅瑞士收藏家Uli Zik， 同埋咧 Stella 方小姐咧係會進行一個update 俾我哋係關於呢一個museum education， 呢一個中文係museum 即係博物館嘅教育範疇。咁咧，我哋有一個question and answer session， 咁就係會8點15分開始嘅。咁如果各位先生女士咧可以話翻俾我哋聽你哋嘅問題，留翻嗰段時間咧，咁我哋會開始進行啦。而家咁without further delay, I would like to introduce Ms. Nittve to do a update for us on the development of M+. If I can just have a warm hand of welcome.
Mic is over there. Thank you, and thank you, Desiree. And thank you all for coming through the traffic, through the rain, and finding the entrance, not the least, to the Science Museum, which is not the easiest, actually. This is the second forum we have of this type. But it's not just the second time that we talk about what we're doing and what our thinking is. Some time ago, we made a calculation of all the meetings that I have and senior members of the team have had with various stakeholders around in Hong Kong. And we counted to almost 1,200 people that we've sat down with in smaller configurations, 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3. And talked about it. And of course, as you know, there's been a lot of public consultations and other talks over the time. The last time, which was in the spring, when we had a public forum in this space, it wasn't raining that evening, and there was less traffic. We talked more about the, I would say, the mission and vision of M+, and a little bit about, of course, the first exhibitions we had been doing. But it was more about the general direction and trying to express that. Now we will move more into and talk a little bit about what's actually happening, the more direct consequences of the mission and vision. But for those of you who wasn't here last time, And of course, my experience is that you can't really repeat these sort of core things enough, because it's complex, and it's sometimes the first time you hear a museum's mission and vision described. I think it's good maybe for me to also do a little sort of rundown of what the core of the thinking behind M+ is, and how we think about what we're doing. So I will try to relatively briefly run you through that, not the 1-hour presentation I did last time. You can, if you like, you can go to the website, and I think you can find the entire one on YouTube there. Or, of course, the written information on the website is now quite extensive also, if you want to read again or check details again and so forth. But I'll try to sort of do this somewhat briefly, even though it's lots of complex factors involved. So we're talking about M+, the new museum for visual culture in Hong Kong, as we say. Sometimes we also say the future museum of visual culture in Hong Kong. And this is something one can debate whether we exist or not. Of course, in a certain way, we do exist, since we have started to make exhibitions and actually have a program, and we do exist in the public. And just to remind you of the location, the place, not for the museum, but for the museum building, is roughly here, which indicated within the sort of red circle there. And of course, the area you see, this is the West Kowloon Peninsula, where the whole West Kowloon Cultural District will be located. And what you see here is a photo of the model of the Norman Foster, or Foster and Partners to be correct, master plan for the whole area. I think it's important also to remind everybody of that what we are doing now is not something we've sort of completely invented on our own now these 2 years that we've been actually working on the project. It has its basis really in what the Museum Advisory Group, actually they spent almost a year as a think tank thinking about what kind of museum is it that Hong Kong needs. And they wrote a really, really good paper, which had this mission statement also in it, describing what they thought this new museum, which they actually called M+. It was a sort of tentative working title that just stuck, by the way, what they thought it should be. And it says, the mission of M+ is to focus on 20th and 21st century visual culture, broadly defined, from a Hong Kong perspective, with a global vision. And then it continued, with an open, flexible and forward-looking attitude, M+ aims to inspire, delight, educate and engage the public, to explore diversity and foster creativity. Second part probably you could find in many mission statements of more museums that with some modern thinking. But the first part is quite specific for M+, I would say, that we should focus on 20th and 21st century visual culture, broadly defined from a Hong Kong perspective, but with a global vision. And even though there are actually 4 sentences here, I would claim still that the project rests on 3 pillars. Maybe I should check on the graphics of this in the future. The first pillar is really that it's a very ambitious project, that it aims at raising the bar for museums in Asia. Really try to establish a new standard, a museological standard, a new standard, and try to set a new standard. And also, of course, it's an ambitious project in terms of the scale of the building and scale of the project and so forth as well. But I think this thing to raise the bar from a museological point of view is really, really important. It's a project, and I think this is even more important, it's a project with a strong public service ethos. And that's what I mean. I think the next sentence belongs to that, so it's a second pillar in a sense. Museum is a museum first and foremost for the people of Hong Kong. I think this was formulated in the day, now it's probably 7 years ago or 8 years ago, when it was decided that Hong Kong should not go down the, say, Dubai model of bringing a sort of Western brand here, for example, a Guggenheim Museum or a Centre Pompidou or something like that, but rather to actually try to create its own museum. And it was on that basis that the Museum Advisory Group then started to sort of formulate its ideas. So it's not defined as a tourist project. It's really defined as something that we build and create for the people who live and work here in Hong Kong. And then, of course, as a consequence actually of that is that you create hopefully something that is unique to Hong Kong, which is exactly the reason why people travel, of course. They want to discover something different. They don't travel to see the same. So there is a sort of logic in it anyway that will make it probably very attractive for people who travel to Hong Kong as well. Well, the third pillar is that when I was asked to come here, I was also asked to, and I really liked that, especially in combination with the first 2 points or pillars, that I was asked to work on a project where we rethought what a museum is today, and to try to create really a museum that is not only of its time, but also of its place. But this sort of challenge to rethink the idea of a museum while creating a large-scale museum is a rather unique combination. Usually when you ask to do big, you're also asked to do the same as already exists elsewhere. And of course, this will be a museum that will build a world-class collection, and I'll get back to that, we're working on that. We will give Hong Kong important exhibitions in a long perspective, and we will try to be a leader in the field of museum education. So I said that M+ is a museum for visual culture. And what do we mean by visual culture and why? Well, we define, broadly speaking, visual culture as what we call visual art, or what we sometimes just call art. And that includes ink art, the ink art tradition, which of course can be seen both as a part of a contemporary, I mean, if it's contemporary or modern ink art, it's a part of contemporary creation, but it also has its own history and story. So therefore this circle sort of sits both within what we call visual art, but also sort of sticks out a little bit on the side. And this overlapping, I think you will soon find, will be a theme here. We will also collect and show moving image, cinema, video art, and other types of moving image, electronic, digital, and so forth. Popular culture, which is a slightly different type of category, though, will be part of the story. Design and architecture as well. And you see now that this forms something that is a dialogue between these different genres, these different art forms. And I think this is something that actually doesn't feel that radical in Hong Kong, even though we don't have museums that really work like this or do this, and who work with the dialogue situation between the different forms of visual culture. But if you look at many of the practitioners in Hong Kong, whether, I mean, I can easily think of a number of architects who actually also are well established as artists, people who are artists who also have success in the advertising or graphic design area and so forth. And it's so easy in Hong Kong to move between these different areas and have several hats without any problems. This would create a problem immediately if you were in the West, where actually there is no way you can be respected as an artist if you come out of, for example, advertising. That's very, very difficult. But that kind of fluidity is quite common here in Hong Kong, as I'm sure you all know, and common in general in Asia also. I mean, Japan has proven this for many, many decades as well. And we will embrace this. We will not be afraid of this dialogue, but rather embrace it and see it as something that is an exciting way of presenting material, while at the same time also respecting that there is a story that is specific, for example, for, say, a story of Hong Kong cinema or the development of Asian design or something like that, that also needs to be told as a sort of internal story which has to do with influences and materials and so forth. So there are, of course, two sides to it, but the core of it will be this embracing the dialogue situation of visual culture. And as we said, and as actually the Museum Advisory Group already said, it's with a global vision. And that means that we look at the world from a Hong Kong perspective. And in principle, you can say that if we create an international museum or a global museum, however you like to name it, in principle, we do the same thing as the Western museums have always been doing. It's just that we look at the world from a different perspective. Instead of having the core being British art or American art or French art, it will be art from Hong Kong, art from, and not only art, of course, but design and architecture and so forth, from the Pearl River Delta, from China. And I think this will be the core of what we'll be doing. This will be the core story. This is what people will feel like when they come here, that they come to a place that is anchored here. But we'll also be about Asia. Of course, we will have a better presentation and representation of what happens in the various layers of Asia than, for example, a museum in New York or in London would have. But also we will, of course, go beyond Asia. But those acquisitions will be very strategic, very selective, and the focus will be to try to acquire works and show works that actually add to the story, have a special resonance to the core of the story, which is Hong Kong, which is Pearl River Delta, which is China. And then we do exhibitions. And these exhibitions can, of course, cut across. They can cut across in terms of timelines, in terms of geography. And it's both about, as I showed here, of course, creating a platform for artists to live and work here, a platform that has strong spotlight on it so the world really discovers the great art from Hong Kong. And at the same time, something we've been lacking badly here, outside the auction previews and art fairs and some galleries, is actually to bring the best of the rest of the world to Hong Kong as well, so we can see really the great masters. So this kind of breathing is important. And another one is that we also want to be a home away from home, so to say, for the Chinese diaspora. Chinese artists with a Chinese background that actually maybe live in Canada, in the US, in France, and so forth, and give them a place, a sort of anchor in Asia as well, and in China. We have a few lead words, and we like mantras in the team. And one is excellence and access. And basically what it means, of course, is that a museum, that you actually have, you work for two parties. On one hand, what you do in a museum is to create a place where you realize the visions of the artists and make them really optimize their dreams, in a sense, and realize their dreams. So no compromise, excellence. But at the same time, you want to create a place where the public who comes and meets the art, and we create that meeting place, feel that it's for them, that they are welcome, that they come to a place where they can feel really equipped for this meeting, in a sense. So that's the sort of important dialogue that we have. Another mantra we have is, the more you know, the more you see. And that, of course, implies, this is true for everything in life, actually, but it's definitely true for art. And, of course, that means that education is incredibly important and central to us, but also reminding ourselves of the fact that education is not an add-on to what you do as a curator or you do in a museum. It's an integral part of what you do in the museum. A museum is an educational facility in a certain way. Everything you do in a museum is part of a sort of interpretation process. And so when we talk about education, and Stella will talk about that specifically, it is not an add-on just. And finally, a third mantra we have is, and I think this is a really important one as well, the museum is not the same as the building. It's the relationship between the museum's content and its audiences. So it's not, the building is a tool, rather. It's not the museum in itself. It's actually the art we show and the sort of meeting we create. That's the museum. But we are building a building, and I showed you the site earlier on. Presently, the M+ building is planned to be 62,000 square meters. GFA is gross floor area. When you live in Hong Kong, you know everything about different types of floor areas when you rent or apartments or so, because they're always much smaller than they sound when you count the square foot. So, but this is a very big museum. This is on the scale of say, basically on the scale of, say, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it gives us, depending on the final design, about 17,000 square meters exhibition space, which is very big. But we're also, of course, showing not only a lot of art that is very space hungry, but also we have, as I said, we're going to present many different types of material that will require large spaces. It will give us really good conservation and storage facilities, learning spaces, theaters, library and resource center, plus outdoor plazas and art pavilions outside the big building. And actually the competition for the museum building is ongoing as we speak. The competition to select a concept design as it's formulated and the design team, meaning the architects and their sort of sub-consultants. And the timeline for this is as follows. So we have passed this date, 17th of September, requests for expressions of interest. So there's a pre-qualification process. We passed the closing date for those. We are in the process or have just finalized the assessments of the expressions of interests. And now it's in a sort of decision-making phase, going through various committees and boards. And in December, we expect to be able to announce the shortlisted design teams and start the competition proper. So there will be 6 teams that will be shortlisted, and they will then go into the next phase. And this will all, through a number of workshops, lead to, we hope, an announcement, if everything goes smoothly, in June next year. And just to say a few things of what we're looking for and what we're thinking about. Of course, we say that it will be a unique museum of its time and place. I've said that before, relating to these 4 themes I mentioned. And it's also important to remind ourselves of the fact that it's actually is a hub that sits alongside a number of performing art venues. There will be the Free Space, the Sishu Center, there will be Center for Contemporary Performance, and other things being built in the first phase of the West Kowloon Cultural District project. So we will try to encourage interaction between these different venues as well. And we aim to complement, and I'll talk more about that, the white cubes and black boxes of a typical museum with third spaces, new formats for I think, dealing with, living with, addressing various types of art design, architecture, and try to open up also what is called front of house to back of house in various ways. And we're looking for a building that acknowledges the unique location of M+. I mean, it's a fantastic location. It's like a Sydney Harbour type, Sydney Opera type location, facing Central, sitting there on the Kowloon side. A building that has institutional dignity and as a symbolic guarantee of quality and integrity. It's transparent and accessible, stating even from the outside that you're welcome, it's yours, that you feel that it's for you. You're supposed to come here. It's built for, it's a democratic building. And something that can combine architectural signature with spaces that are friendly to both art and visitors, and embodies the ultimate purpose of a museum, to be a place where objects from visual culture meet the public, and succeeds in being optimal for 2 parties, the parties I just mentioned, with exceedingly disparate requirements and wishes. Of course, the artists, when they present their works, may not necessarily ask for the same conditions that you as a visitor ask for, but it's about finding the right balance between the 2. And it's for excellence and access, as I just said. So this is basically what we're looking for. These are the sort of core criteria, I think, which are, of course, can take many different shapes. And what we are also thinking of and trying to do is to really rethink the various modes of presentation you have. Museums normally have white cubes. And then when video and such things started to appear some 20, 30 years ago, you got black boxes as well, which could show video and project videos. But for example, a question that I asked also in the previous presentation was, is there an Asian type of display? I mean, how about scrolls? How do you show them? That's a totally different process that requires another type of intimacy, a different type of space. It's a different type of process. You don't put them just like many museums actually do also in Asia, or all museums almost in Asia do. You don't put them just on the wall behind glass. There's a process of discovery and unrolling the scroll and so forth. How can we create that space? Can we find a new type of space in the museum that actually can meet these requirements? Are there ways that goes beyond the sort of black box way of looking at and understanding and investigating moving image material? So you can be a participant and actually compare, discover, and so forth in different ways. Be more active in your looking at moving image material. Is there a third place for displaying contemporary art, something between the storage and the gallery? This is a Duke box for, you can say, for art, mainly for paintings and flat works, where you, on a touchscreen, ask for works to come out, and basically it's an industrial robot that brings out a group of works or a single work. And as I mentioned, can you break up this border between what's the secret things that happen behind the conservation processes, the packing of artworks, all the things that are not visible for you as a museum visitor? And can that be made to some extent visible, and how, if so? So it's not like secret or in the public eye, but actually there is another type of transparency. And of course, always remember that these days, when you build a museum, the building is one part. Actually, you almost build a digital parallel building to that also, which needs to take care of all the digital needs that comes with the museum. All the artists actually work with digital media, for example, their platforms, plus the educational and other aspects you need. And also, again, that we will live and work and experience the museum outside the building. That public art will be a central thing, of course, primarily out in the whole West Kowloon area. This is a picture from Los Angeles, but it could be in West Kowloon as well, but the art would look differently, I guess. So we will commission artworks that we integrate into the park, become a part of the park and the park experience. And of course, if the building is not the same as the museum, why don't we start doing projects now? And as you know, we did do that in January last year. So we did the Bamboo Theatre exhibition, and I have a few images from there. This is Michael Wolff's Portraits of Cantonese Opera, showing was the Harbour Viewing Tower, Gaylord Chan's New Year trophy set of 12, his Gaylord's fantastic flags on the Bamboo Theatre. Henry Chu and Samsung Yang's digital work, which was made for an iPhone, iPad, was a sound and digital work. And we, of course, also had a Bamboo Theatre cinema, a whole day screening in the Bamboo Theatre, which was, as you can see, extremely popular. And we continued with Mobile M+, Yamate. This was the info hub in the heart of Yamate. Leung Mi Ping's I Miss Fanta installation in the park. Yulik Wai's Fantomas. This is Pak Chung Chun's part of his art project, and Zhang Qinghua's installation, The Fourth Seal. Erkka Nissinen's Silopolis. And Kwang Chung Shi's and Wong Wai Yin's Hong Kong's Core Values installation and project as well. And we continue to do other things. Now in December, there is M+ Matters, which is a series of more in-depth seminars, symposiums and so that we present that you can visit. There are two of them. One about Asian design, histories, collecting and curating on the 3rd of December, Monday. And the second one, histories and individual practices of contemporary ink art on the 15th of December. And you can see phenomenal speakers, and it all takes place at Asia Society And in this case, it's between 6 and 8:30 in the evening because it's a Monday, and on Saturday it's between 2 and 4:30. But in the same place, Asia Society, in their new building in Admiralty. This is the Chinese version of the same information. And of course, all this information is on our website as well. So if you want to go back and check dates and so forth, you can do that. But and then in January we have a next upcoming exhibition, which is Songdong 36 Calendars, which opens on the Monday, I think it is, on the 21st of January, which is a large project which we do together with Asia Art Archive. So it's a collaboration between Mobile M+, in its sort of exhibition mode, and Asia Art Archive. And it's a sort of the second phase of a large research project, internship project that Songdong did at Asia Art Archive.